Alright, my name is Sean Fallon, and you're listening to episode 30, Mad Max. Welcome to From First to Last. See the line where the sky meets the... Hello again, and welcome again. My name is Sean Fallon. This is From First to Last. Today is a very special episode. It's episode 30, which means that it is the third movie special. So joining me today, I have, he's very shiny in chrome, Dave Shreve. How are you today, Dave?
I'm good, witness. Thanks for having me on today, for having me on again after the disaster of the last effort. But I appreciate the invite, and I'm really excited about talking about one of my favorite recent movies.
Which is?
Fury Road, but I don't want to skip over Mad Max, because that's also kind of good. So, yeah, both two good movies.
Yep, so the Mad Max saga, if you will, is it spans 4 movies so far, and the first movie was 1979, and the most recent was 2015. So, what is your experience with these? I guess what's your experience with the original Mad Max?
The original Mad Max, I joined the first time I watched halfway through the middle, so I presumed it was about a mad cop going after a Jewish biker gang. I'm just kidding. Cool. That's not what I thought. I watched it a long time ago. I remember thinking that's a kind of cool movie, and it's kind of how I always encapsulated in my memory Mel Gibson's early career. I think it was a very Mel Gibson-y role for that early part. Didn't rewatch it again, so probably 20 good years, maybe even 25 good years between watching it the first time and rewatching it prior to going into Fury Road. I remember rewatching it before going into Fury Road and thinking, before I seen Fury Road, and thinking, this movie leads into the movie that these trailers are promising, and that's a lot of territory, a lot of progressive film landscape that seems to be covered, and being really curious, not making much note of like how anything specific about Mad Max, but wondering how Mad Max could in 3 movies lead up to what was being promised by the trailers. So I liked it. I liked it well enough. I like Mad Max 2 better than Mad Max 1. But I like Mad Max well enough when I watched it again, and then I watched it again this week, and I liked it a little more because I was able to concentrate on it a little more with retrospective from Fury Road.
So. Yeah, that's it. Like, watching it for this podcast was only actually, it turns out, I realised the second time I'd ever watched it. And I was on Skype, because I'd seen it before, but couldn't quite remember when. I was on Skype with my mum last night, and she's in England and I'm in Australia, and I was saying to her, I remember going to Auntie Pat's house, and me and my brother and a couple of my cousins were left in the house, and everyone else went out for beers. And I remember watching this film, and it scared the shit out of me. And the next morning, we made scrambled eggs, and all of my cousins put tomato ketchup on it, and it really disgusted me. And then that's all I remember. And she was like, yeah, she said that would have been about 1990. I was like, oh, okay. So I was 6 years old. Cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just sort of had, when I was rewatching it, these kind of I think 3 very vivid memories, which were the ending with Johnny the Boy, where he chains him to the car and the car blows up.
Right.
Jess and Sprog getting killed. Oh, and the hand on the chain. And when Goose's hand falls out of the hospital bed and he's all burnt up. And that, remember, was the bit that scared the shit out of me when I was 6. That really got in my head. And obviously stayed in my head for 26 years.
Yeah.
So when I sort of rewatched the film. But yeah, no, I loved it. I think it has that great... if you find yourself watching any, Australian movies from this period... They all have this look. I think you've seen Wake in Fright, haven't you?
Yeah. Very sun-baked and...
Yeah, that's it. Kind of these big open spaces where you're just on your own and all kinds of crazy shit can go down. And they all look like they were made for no budget. No one's had any permits. They've just gone out and just made a film.
Right. That's one of the things I credit with Mad Max. One of the things I'm able to catch this time, because obviously we have the operatic chaos in Fury Road, but that's not absent in Mad Max: The First Entry. It's a very anarchaic movie, and comparatively, it was made, I think, $350,000 when I looked its budget up, which
Yeah.
isn't a lot of money for a movie about car chases and motorcycle gangs and explosions and violence. And yet they make a sort of a Madden version of this revenge tale, or this last stand of a crazy man. That's really impressive for the amount of money that they put into it. Most of it through editing and innovation, and I love some of the camera work that they do in the car sequences and where the camera's mounted and what it shows. And it's choppy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very abrasive in its editing. But again, limitations considered, it is equally maddened in its vision as the fourth chapter, which I think Fury Road's budget comparatively was like, I think 150 million if I remember right. So almost 8 times the budget probably. So just a crazy gap in what was accomplished between those two things with the money.
Yeah, and but also, like you say, it doesn't feel as though like Mad Max was something that they were like, oh, we'll leave that behind and we can move from it. It does. You watch the two films next to each other, even like bits of the soundtrack carry over and things, and it's very much this idea of like George Miller wanted to make this crazy car crash movie, and he did with the resources he had in '79, and then he did it again with the resources he had in '15. But the same sort of like the same sensibilities are definitely on display. It's not like a thing of like, oh, we made this gritty, unpredictable, weird film in the '70s, so now we're going to make this popcorn, happy, friendly movie in 2015. It still has a lot of the same. I sort of like put it in my notes as like it's quite a nasty film.
It is. It's a very nasty film. I think the first one's immeasurably nastier than the last one.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because it's softened by the cinematics in the last one, if the grittiness elevates the nastiness, but just everything, every turn in Mad Max, from, like you said, Sprague and the death of the mother and the child, and the image of the hand falling out, and the toe cutter's eyes popping out for no real reason.
Yeah, like just out of fear.
His eyes popping out of his head out of fear. Like, everything is injected with a little bit more viciousness in the first film. Maybe it's a product of time period, I don't know, but it's a much more aggressively vicious movie. Yeah,
but the same sort, like, obviously it has that sort of 70s sort of hopelessness and that, and but it's interesting, like Miller's sort of kept that thing of, you sort of have in your head rules over which characters do and don't die in movies.
Right.
And I know, like, I think in your review for Fury Road, you mentioned this, like, if you put out all the characters of Fury Road, you'd go, oh, well, the pregnant woman's the one who survives. And obviously, halfway through the movie, he just takes that away from you. And in a quite cruel way. Gives you nearly happens, fake out, and then it happens.
Right.
And you're like, again, he sort of keeps that thing, like Miller did say this, he said, like, people complain about the original Mad Max being like an intensely violent film. And he does say, like, if you actually watch the film, it's all editing. You never see anything. Everything's just implied. And the same sort of thing with Splendid. Like, she falls off, and just as she sort of goes towards where the wheels are, we cut to something else and we move away. But in your head, you're like, no, I think I saw it. And then when Max says she went under the wheel, he's like, yeah, because I saw that. And then or maybe I didn't.
Right.
But the implicit thing is all there. You don't need the gore or the horror. It's all there, like.
Yeah, prior to rewatching this weekend, I thought both. I didn't think I saw the Sprague. I didn't think I saw the baby die, but I thought I'd seen him run over the mother in Mad Max, and I thought I'd seen what's her name from Fury Road? Splendid. I thought I saw her go under at least the axle, but I guess not. I mean, I guess that's just good filmmaking. It's like in the movie Seven, when everybody thinks they see Gwyneth Paltrow's head in the box. There's no head in the box. It's not in there.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, if it leaves you with the impression of the violence well enough, you're going to think you saw the violence, and he does that in both movies.
Yeah, which is great, and I think it is that great thing of just I just like that Miller sort of, his sensibilities didn't really they got softened, but they didn't get completely washed away.
Absolutely.
You do sort of, because he's in his, I think he's in his 70s now, isn't he, George Miller?
Yeah, I think he hit
And
70. I think it was 70 the year that Fury Road came out, but I could be wrong.
but there is that sort of thing. Like I know I've read interviews with Spielberg, and he sort of talks about certain things from his work in the 70s and 80s that he wouldn't do now. Like he talks about like in Jaws he wouldn't have he probably wouldn't have shown Alex Kintner getting killed and stuff like that. And there's elements of like Close Encounters and stuff that he wouldn't do. And you're like, yeah, that's no, keep
Yeah,
that sort of like that sharpness, because that's what made it good.
right. Yeah, and to that degree, like if you measure Spielberg's most recent with George Miller's Return, like Spielberg
Mm.
gave up more than he's given up more of what his trademark than what George Miller did. George Miller added on to it. Steven Spielberg's yielded a little bit. Now I don't
Yeah.
think there's any yielding being done in Fury Road.
No, that's it. Like it is. I mean, there is like we say, like it doesn't have that same sort of nastiness
Right.
as the 70s. Like because it is interesting to think, but then at the same time, when I was watching Fury Road, it is very hard to like for a good. I would say probably the first hour, or at least like the first 45 minutes. Max is not a very heroic character in any way. Like he
Oh,
is quite
not at
prepared
all.
to just leave them in the desert and stuff like that. And you do have to sort of learn to have this character as your hero because you're presented with Furiosa, who's bona fide hero from day one.
Right.
But you have to like he makes you work for it that
Right.
Max is the hero, like which is incredible. He sort of gets his little actiony moment at the start, then spends a lot of time static, tied up or chained to something, and then when he is doing stuff, he's beating up your hero Furiosa, and then he's trying to just leave them in the desert to
Right.
to Joe, and it's again sort of that interesting thing of like I don't know if it is a 70s thing, but like anti-hero in the sense of like he's not an anti-hero because he's like cool. He's an
Right.
anti-hero because his name's on the title of the film, but he's quite prepared to just be out for himself and fuck people over, which
Yes.
makes
Yes.
obviously his journey to the end of the film so much more satisfying when he does sort of realize he has to be part of this whole thing. It's great. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, I think both of us can agree that Fury Road is fucking incredible.
It's one of my favorite movies ever. It's not like
Yeah.
probably top 20 at least, and might even go up from there. But I thought when I was watching, my thought in the middle of watching Fury Road, I scribbled down the note that this is the perfect movie series for your
Yeah,
podcast
yeah,
aesthetic, because so much to measure between Mad Max 1 and Fury Road in terms of any element, including, as you were just touching upon, Max's journey. Like,
yeah,
I said to myself watching this that when I was watching Fury Road, that if doing this podcast, if we didn't say that there were four movies, or we didn't know that there were four movies when we watched these two movies, it would feel like there were 17 movies between Mad Max and Fury Road, because in measure of cinematic technology, the
yeah,
overall look of it, the scope, the ambition, and uh, the distinction between the pre-apocalyptic world of Mad Max and the post-apocalyptic world of
yeah,
Fury Road. Like, a lot of things had to have happened between those two things, and in the measurement between the quiet, solemn, intense Mel Gibson Mad Max that we start out with, who is at least recognizably righteous from the beginning and posed in a hero's position from the first scene when he outruns the Dark Knight
yeah,
in the first chase. We know from that sequence on that he's at least the functional anti-hero in the hero's position of the movie. And
yeah,
then, but when we get and he's intense and he's intelligent and he makes decisions. But the Mad Max that we get in Fury Road with Tom Hardy, the Max Radkowski, is rabid. He's subhuman almost. He's hairy and
yeah,
he walks with a crouch, and his sentences don't make any sense. And he talks to himself, and he has these weird flashbacks. His movements are jerky. He acts like an animal. He's
yeah,
chained up, and like you said, he attacks the functional hero in the first 40 minutes of the movie. He doesn't do anything heroic at all. Period. And
yeah,
it's that's a lot of landscape for character development to get to from the Mel Gibson introduction to the character. And if you just watch these two movies, you think it'd be a lot of movies to get into that level. But it's not. It's mapped pretty well, because it is the whole series is projectile through those four movies. It's it's fuel blasted, immediately intense, gas to the floor the whole time.
Yeah.
So it's covered. It's all mapped out there if you watch all 4 movies. But if you watch 1 and 4, you'd be a little surprised at what gets covered in those 4 chapters.
It's very interesting, like, yeah, to watch the two next to each other, and you've got the thing of, like, you know, Max, where he's married and he's making jokes and he's, you know, all loved up and he's going on little beach holidays and stuff like that. And then you've got Fury Road Max, and in his opening sequence, he just eats a big 2-headed lizard. You know, it's and then. And like you say, and he's feral and he's covered in hair, and, like, you know, and the tattoo in his back, you know, he is like high octane road warrior, you know, found out in the wilds and all that. And it's great, and it does work. Like, I remember the first time I saw this film in the cinema, like when it came out, and it was frustrating. I was just like, oh, for fuck's sake, Max, just, you know, work it out, mate.
Yeah.
But when you sort of watch it and you've got to, like, look at it, like, critically, or when you just watch it and just to enjoy it, it does work, because there is that thing of, like, well, this is a world where your morals aren't worth anything anymore. You've got to just, if you're trying to just, you know, you've got one instinct to survive.
Right.
So other people can piss right off. You've just got to just do what's in your own best interests.
Yeah. And we're just visiting that world. He's lived however many decades in it. And if you do it chronologically, then it's nearly 40 years that the characters existed there. But you have to think it's probably less than that. But still, who knows exactly how long? It's hard to measure just by virtue of character progression. But we assume Mel Gibson's in his mid-20s, early 20s in Mad Max.
Yeah.
And just based on how hard he plays the character, he could be 45, 46, maybe 2 decades of living in a post-apocalyptic world. And carrying not just the 4 chapters of the film, but because George Miller, at least in the last 2 movies, has made this expansive, ever-growing, boundless universe through unprecedented world-building in modern film.
Oh, definitely.
We know that there's more in between the chapters that we're not catching. And we see glimpses of it, sideways glimpses, in Return to Thunderdome and in Fury Road, Beyond Thunderdome.
Yeah, that's very true. And, like, on that point of, like, world building, this movie, like Fury Road, and even, like, Mad Max to an extent, like, I feel like it's a lost art, and every time it happens, I'm always impressed by it. But that's sort of, like, very, very comfortable world building where you are given nothing except what happens. You know, there's not, like, an opening scroll at the start, or it's not tons of exposition. Like, at no point does anyone tell you what Gastown or the Bullet Farm is.
Right. They say it, and then you keep up if you can.
Yeah, that's it. You know, and in the same way, you don't need to know, like, you don't get a whole backstory of how, like, a Morton Joe came to power or stuff like that. And then in the first film, you don't really get explained what Max's job is, because he's not quite, you know, they're cops, but they're sort of, like, weird cops, and then you don't understand, like, where these bikers have come from, what their deal is, and why everyone knows who they are, and so on. And you don't need to know. I mean, it's like, recently, like, a similar sort of thing in terms of, like, that sort of intensely good world building. I'd say, like, you know, obviously Children of Men, but the John Wick movies do it so well, and Logan, I thought, was great for it.
Yeah, there's no stopping. They don't stop the story to inject exposition.
Yeah.
None at all. And that's a leap of faith on your audience too. Like, it's enlivened storytelling, but it gives you credit for being smarter than what movies that do stop to explain these things don't give their audience credit for. Obviously the antithesis, and I'm not knocking its model, they're fine movies, but sometimes some of these superhero universes stop to explain too much. They slow themselves down, and they build, we can see their world building, where in Fury Road we just feel it and intuit it, and it's there, and we feel the world around us. We don't have it drawn for us, we feel it around us. The best example that of world building I think I've ever seen is in Fury Road, when they're driving along, when they're driving, having gotten away after the tunnel passage that was collapsed on Morton Joe and his followers, and then the next thing we see is Max and Furiosa and crew driving through a swamp with stilt walkers,
Yeah.
And nobody even mentions those. We just see them for 3 seconds, and it feels like an extension of the world that is boundless. Like 100 stories are happening past the boundary of the story we're watching, but we don't have time for that right now. And it adds that element of like there being no limitations, and it feels so much more magical that we just casually witnessed an extension of the world without having somebody come in with a voiceover or two scientists come in and say, "Oh, well, I know what that is. That's still walking,
Yeah.
blah blah blah." Like, just drive past it and let us see it, and everything feels bigger and wider. And you're right, they do that in the first movie. That is, they approach it the same way. They build it through idiosyncrasies instead of like the character idiosyncrasies of Toe Cutter and Bubba and Knight Rider and what we don't see enough of. We know that they're outlandish. We know that whatever they've experienced as a gang and whatever made them form is formed either in consequence of or in cause of that weird personality behavior of theirs. But it's never like, oh, this is what that gang does and this is why they're mad. It's like, you're in it. You're in it and keep up. Keep up and make up your own assumptions about things that aren't pertinent to this singular chase. So.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And yeah, obviously that scene with the stilt walkers is incredible. And when this is done really well and you sort of just notice it in the back of your mind and it's just like this world just building, and obviously like with each rewatch you see something else and the world gets bigger and then gets bigger. And then when you see this and it's not done, like I had this experience when I went to go see Kong Skull Island.
Okay.
And just every line of dialogue in that film was exposition.
Yes.
And it killed me because I was just like, no, stop telling me shit. You're not in that this movie's not that complicated. You know, this could have been a really cool sort of like world building thing of like what's on this island, who's been to the island before, and so on and so on and so on. But it was just that constant thing of like, oh yeah, this is this person, this is this person, this is their shady background, this is my shady background, this is a monster, this is, you know, and you're like, no, dude, there's a big monkey on an island, we'll work it out.
Yep.
You know, whereas like watching Logan or this or Children of Men or John Wick or whatever, where you've just got that idea of like this tantalizing idea of what else is happening in the world and what can't we see, and you know, and it's great, and it's so difficult to do because it would be so tempting to just sort of have like, you know, Max narrate the film, or have one of the wives, one of the breeders is like really smart, so she just points everything out. You know, it's like, no, that's just you don't need it. You just need, because the thing with Fury Road is the fact that, and it is a complaint that people have had who are idiots, is that the whole story is like forward momentum and propulsion because it's a car chase.
Yes.
It's a 2-hour car chase. So you don't need like long exposition of stuff, because all you need to know is where the war rig is and where the people pursuing it are, and the distance and the speed and the relation of that, and everything else is just cream on the cake.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. It's all that side, that it's a boundless world through which we're driving a straight line. Like, he builds a world that has no boundaries, and we drive a straight line through it, and we see only what's on that straight line, and we see it at one almost consistently held speed of narration.
Yeah, that's it.
Like we're not slowing, we're not turning sideways, we're not steering into this. There's no side chapters, there's no cameos. Just stay on this straight line, and we're projecting forward into this. That's the whole point of the Mad Max universe, is that fuel pushes things forward, and I love it. Yeah, I love everything about Fury Road, and even its prequels now.
And it's great because like that was something that came out after Fury Road. Like a lot of complaints of, it didn't have story, or it didn't have this, or it didn't have that. And there's like a few people I sort of can't see getting like quoted and stuff on Twitter, and their whole character seems to be that they've read a couple of script books, so they know what a script is. So when a film comes out that doesn't follow like a standard 3-act rising, falling action, all that shite, they believe it's worthless. Like, right. I think I've even seen you have arguments with people about this, like Moonlight was a very typical one of that. Like, people come out and being like, oh, it's not a real movie because of this, this, and this. Like, no, it's a real movie because I cried for 3 days after watching it and have not stopped thinking about it since I saw it. It's not a thing of like, oh, because Chiron didn't save a cat at the start of the story, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's I remember that, because I remember that being, and I'm going to drop their names on your podcast, so hopefully they never hear it, But I remember that being a conversation between Max Landis and Seth Rogen about how it wasn't a movie, it was an experience. And I
That's
thought
it,
that was
yeah.
so frightening because two guys who, more than anybody I can think of, seemingly get to make whatever fucking movie they want.
Yeah.
These two guys, because of nepotism and because of Rogan being like an in Hollywood guy, and again, I like Rogan and I like a lot of the
Yeah.
movies he makes and a lot of things he pushes them behind. But it's scary to me that they're having a public conversation seen by anyone who is interested in those two's philosophy on movie about whether Moonlight is a movie or not, and whether it has conflict. And it's all very much there. It doesn't
Yeah.
follow prescriptivist script rules, but the structure is there. It's the conflict is there. It's a personal discovery story. It's a conflict that's all internal but needs to be felt with empathy. And achieved more. Like the line is there, the structure is there. It's a guy who doesn't know who he is, who learns who he is, but can't make that exist in the world, and then finally accepts who he is. It's 3 acts, and it fits that. It fits that standard that they're looking for in the way that cinema seeks to, not scripts seek to. Like it's a story told through visuals, feeling, empathy, emotion, and characters, not just script structure.
Yeah.
So yeah, and you could probably, if you wanted to map it out visually, or you wanted to map it out empathetically through the characters or through the world building, you could probably find the same structure in Fury Road. But yes, there's a weak script, but scripts aren't cinema. It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
So
That's very true. Like, yeah, that sort of thing of like, because I've even seen, I think George Miller's come out and said there wasn't really a script for this; it was storyboards.
right,
You know, and I think Tom Hardy at, I think it was at Cannes, he apologized to George Miller, and he said, you know, after he'd seen the film, he said, "Oh, during the making of the movie, he said, like Tom Hardy said, he was very, very difficult because he couldn't see it, he couldn't put it in his head. He
right,
said, we're just out there in the desert crashing cars, and this is happening, this is happening." He said, and I couldn't put it together what it was. And Charlize Theron said the same thing. She said, day in, day out, I just didn't know what we were doing.
right.
And I was just doing what I was told. And I was looking at these storyboards and I was doing it. And it's a massive testament to, is it Marjorie Siskel, Marianne Siskel? Miller's wife who edited it. That anything looks like anything, you know, because yeah, they just said, yeah, we're just out in the desert just doing all this mad shit, and Miller sort of half explained it to them, but he obviously had it completely in his head, and he gave it to his wife and said, I want you to edit this because I don't want it to be edited like some, you know, some pro editing it, making it look like every other action movie. I want you to put a bit of sensitivity on it, and then just creates this incredible movie, which, like you say, I wouldn't, you know, if someone said to me, oh, have you read the script for Fury Road? I'd be like, what would be the point of reading the script for Fury Road?
Right.
It has like, there's 20 lines of dialogue. You know, or
And,
maybe
and
100
half
lines
of the dialogue is prose poetry, like nonsensical thing that won't work on the page. Anything that any of the kidnapped women say, for the most part, is just it's sprawling. It's 5 people telling a different prose poem, and they're all intersecting in this.
Yeah.
In the anarchy of the screen.
The Dag, I think it's Abby Cornish, the one with the white hair, where she's like, you know, can you hear that? Is that just the wind, or is it a ceaseless vexation, or something like that?
Yeah.
And she's amazing. Like, does that sort of thing of, and like I say, there's a lot of like non sequiturs and like, I think it's Capable with the red hair, who's Elvis's granddaughter, the actress.
Oh, really?
Who I'm madly in love with from this film. Yeah. And yeah, when she's talking to Nux, and she's kind of just says, you know, he says, oh, I was supposed to go to Valhalla, and she's like, oh, maybe it's not your manifest destiny to do that. And it's a very clunky line, but they sell them all so well.
Yeah, if you're a script prescriptivist, if you're somebody who believes scripts have to operate this way and that's where the movie comes from, you're going to read the script and be like, nah, I'm done. I'm not filming this. And I think if anything, that's a lesson, because look what you passed up on. Like, read the script, see it on the screen. That's what you're passing up on if you're a prescriptivist when it comes to like script purity and that sort of thing. Because it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. That doesn't work. That script, if you believe movies are built from script, that script doesn't work. It doesn't work. So.
No, it doesn't. Well, I mean, you've got the thing of like, you know, the character who your movie's named after barely speaks. You know, and when Max does speak, he's so. I mean, Tom Hardy, I think, plays it really well. Like, you do get the feeling when he's talking to people that he has not talked to people for a very, very long time.
Right.
You know, he's so disjointed, and you know, I think even when he first interacts with like all of the wives and Furiosa, when he's got the gun pointed at them, I don't even think he speaks. He just points and grunts like, and he points to the water and he points to someone else and all that.
He says
And
water.
then,
That's what he says. Water. I think.
yeah,
He says water, and that's it. And then he guides them with flashing the shotgun.
yeah, that's it. And like, which again is sort of, how do you sell that? How do you sell a character who doesn't speak? And then, I mean, one of my favorite bits is at the end when he does say to Furiosa, he's like, oh, my name is Max, and he plays it as though he's quite embarrassed. Like it is like this huge emotional confession to say, to tell her his name and stuff like that. And I think it's great. I think he plays it really well. Because it is a bit of a thankless role, because you are playing the main character in the film. You don't get any cool lines. You get some cool action sequences, but the main image I think that has come from this film and has been on all the posters and stuff is you kneeling down and someone else using you as a gun perch.
Right.
And that is on, I think that's on the Blu-ray cover and stuff like that. Like, that is an image that they've taken from this film and been like, yeah, this movie about Mad Max, we're not going to show him driving or jumping away from an explosion or something. We're going to show him relinquishing his sort of power to someone else who's more talented. Which again is, which is a heroic thing, I guess, which is sort of like putting your own bullshit aside and being like, okay, she's a better shot than me. I'm just going to, I'll be the perch, which I think is great. I love that scene.
Yeah, I think that scene's really good thematically. It's really good for Furiosa. I think it's also like a moment because you see Max have that kind of eye-rolling submission, like, okay, fine, and it gets down, and then it happens. It's like, okay, well, that was a good decision. So there's like there's a little joke there too about his own stubborn arrogance, and why wouldn't he be arrogant? He survived the apocalypse for 20 years. You got to think that you're the baddest dude on the block at that point, but he learns that he's not, and that helps establish the respect necessary for him to turn around, grab Furiosa, and lead her to the end of her hero's journey, sort of guide to what she accomplishes on her own, almost wholly through the whole movie. It's and can we start giving Tom Hardy credit for some of the sacrifices he makes? Like, a lot of people think of acting as volume and what they do and what they put forward, but how many times has Tom Hardy like excelled in a movie where he's asked to hold something back? Like in Bane, it's presence and not his face. And in Lawless, he kind of does the same thing, which is a pretty underrated movie or under-celebrated movie in my opinion. I think he's all presence. He doesn't get to speak much. He's mostly grunts there, and he's kind of the same thing in The Revenant. He's in my opinion, the best actor in the movie The Revenant. And
he's great in that. Yeah.
So just a guy who I think has been shining brightly, but I don't think we've measured just how brightly he's shined, because it's not typical of the A-lister to approach things and accept things the way that he does.
Yeah, no, there's an interesting thing in William Goldman, one of his books, I think it's Which Lie Did I Tell? And he talks about when they wrote Misery, and he said the hardest thing for Misery was casting the lead male. He said, because at that point, no sort of, like, this was in the 90s, like, no Hollywood A-list male actor wanted a role that was essentially them at the I can't think of the word, like, just in the thrall of this like powerful woman with a better performance,
right?
Because everyone, if you read the script, you're like, nah, whoever plays Annie Wilkes is going to own this movie, right? So they apparently went, okay, they went to Richard Gere, they went to Robert Redford, they went, Harrison Ford, everyone turned it down. And it was only, I think, James Caan's career had like taken a bit of a dip, so he took the role and obviously was great in it. But it was very much that thing of like, no actor wanted to sacrifice their power to give someone else the limelight. And I think Tom Hardy is very much that thing of like, nah, he's happy to come in and wear a fucking mask for a whole film and just be a pair of eyes and a quite weird voice and be a great character and all that. But he's willing to, like you say, make those sacrifices.
His best performance is just him in a car talking on a phone, like.
Yeah.
In the movie Locke.
Locke, yeah.
Yeah, it's just him in a car, and he tones down everything there. He just makes it a conversation because he realizes that's where the best part of the movie is. Like, he never oversteps his own reserved space, and I think that's a pretty incredible thing for a guy who, he's not even 40 yet, right? He's still a rather young actor who's new to the thing, and he's already making these like selfless decisions in his roles, and I think that's a pretty commendable thing, and it's made for some iconic characters that, because of that, we don't really think of as like Tom Hardy characters, but Tom Hardy's made some iconic characters already.
Yeah, no, that's it. And it's interesting, like, when his name sometimes gets tossed in the hat for like Bond and stuff like that, which would
Yeah.
be interesting. Like I think he's got like it's interesting sort of to look at Mad Max. 'Cause I was sort of when I was watching it because I know Fury Road had been around for years. I remember reading about this when I was a teenager. Like
Hmm.
reading like film magazines and it being like George Miller was in Tunisia scoping out spots for filming Fury Road and all this. And I mean, originally I think it was supposed to be Mel Gibson right up until Mel Gibson revealed himself to be human garbage.
Right.
And it is interesting, like because when I was sort of watching this tonight, I was like, I wonder if Mel Gibson hadn't turned out to be shit, would this role have worked with him in it? And was it a thing of like, well, as Mel Gibson's getting older, we're going to push more of the sort of the action towards Furiosa and have sort of Gibson in that sort of supporting role because it would be unbelievable for him to be a 50-year-old man doing this sort of action stuff. And I don't know, I couldn't I think I was sort of maybe even trying to find excuses for why Furiosa was so awesome. Like, I think maybe that was just something that was built into my brain of like,
Yeah.
there must be a reason why this female character is so good. There must be an excuse. I
Right.
don't think there is. I think it's just, they've just got this incredible character, and she's just better than him. And then
Yeah.
that's just simply it. Like, she is just more capable. And I think you could extract Max out of this film and still have pretty much the same result. I think they would still sort of get away and save the day and all that
Oh, sure.
because he actually hinders them for quite a few
Right.
parts of the film. Like,
Yeah, Mad Max is almost in the film to slow them down enough to let them get caught at a certain point. Like,
yeah,
if it weren't for the fight, they got 4 more minutes of head start to go, and they get through the tunnel okay. Like, nothing's revealed. All the wives hide in the necessary spot, and they just get through. But
yeah,
yeah, he's a weird. It's a weird. Everything about this movie is so bold of a decision to do,
yeah.
and it just makes you wish like that visionary filmmakers like this could have the non-interventionalist model of storytelling, and if they could end up here, if you could get here in 4 movies with other series, because how many series get this much better in 4 movies over 3 decades? Like, it just doesn't work
Yeah.
like that. So it's crazy.
Well, that was the interesting thing actually because 2015 when Fury Road came out was sort of like a banner year for this kind of film because you had a new Terminator, a new Jurassic Park, a new Star Wars, a new Rocky, and a new Mad Max.
Right.
And I think you need, if you sit down and you put those 5 films in front of you, you can really see how Returning to the Well can be done incredibly well and how it can be done incredibly poorly.
Right.
Like the sort of scope of quality between like Creed and Fury Road and then Jurassic World and Terminator Genesis
Right.
is so vast. It was sort of like Force Awakens moving around in between because I think that film is sort of hindered a lot by the fact that they had to come out and say, no, guys, we can make a Star Wars. We'll show you how we can do it. I think it sort of has that thing of like, okay, you've got to kick in the door a little bit and sort of say, right, guys, you like Star Wars, you didn't like the last Star Wars, this is how we Star Wars.
Yeah.
Whereas because it's interesting as well because even like Creed shows you how you can pretty much like remake the original movie, but make it on your own terms and make it a masterpiece. Like
Yeah,
Fury Road and Creed. Yeah.
Creed is insane because Creed does all of those things, but also corrects like 4 movies of sins from the original series. All the mistakes that the Rocky series made. It's not a perfect series. It's my favorite film series because I love Rocky Balboa the character. But it's a very imperfect series, and they've done a lot of bad decisions in that filmmaking. But the character himself is my favorite, and chief among them, the treatment of Apollo Creed in his last movie, it just wasn't good. Apollo Creed was pivotal to the Rocky series, and he wasn't sent off the right way. And Creed was able to go back and touch that up, and somehow without Carl Weathers make a make a better Creed character, make a better Apollo character too. Like it feels like Apollo was redeemed through Creed. So it continued the series, it created a new series, and it touched up all the problems of the former series. It was such an insanely brilliant movie from start to finish. I love everything about Creed. And you're right, it didn't have to do the apology and the plea that Force Awakens had to do. And neither did Fury Road, because nobody was really in any way emotionally invested in what happened next in the Mad Max series. So
Yeah, well,
so
yeah,
kind of clean
very much
slate.
so.
Yeah, but
What was interesting for me was like of those five movies, the two I was least excited for were Creed and Mad Max. Like I
right,
was sort of like when I heard that Creed existed, I was like, meh, I don't care. And
right,
then Mad Max, I was like, meh, I watched the film in the '90s, whatever. And obviously they're the two best ones.
yeah,
And like Jurassic World is just, I think that film's just been done to death in the sense of like, what is it? What's it? What's the point of it? And then obviously interestingly enough, the last movie special we talked about Terminator Genesis, which was a fascinating thing in how to like watch a film and then like watch the original and then get to the next one 20, 30 years later and completely miss the point of the original.
right. Yes,
Like I think that the thing with like Creed and Fury Road is that because actually the first movie special was Creed because I did Rocky and Rocky Balboa and
yep,
Creed with Jack Godwin. And if you watch Rocky up against Creed, they work.
yep,
It works as a film. It works as a double bill in the same way Fury Road and Mad Max did.
right.
Like watching Mad Max, there was even bits towards the end when the music kicked in and it was like violins like dun 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 dun. And then when I was watching Fury Road, like oh, okay, so they've sort of even taken some of the music cues just to really give it that sort of DNA that runs through the whole thing. And it worked. It definitely it doesn't feel like Miller's trying to correct past mistakes in terms of like filmmaking. He's not like, oh, now I've got more money, now I can do Mad Max right. It's like, no, he always knew how to do it right, and now he's just continuing that trend. He's keeping that up.
Yeah, he doesn't
But
slow
with
down. He doesn't try to.
$150
He doesn't slow down.
Yeah.
He doesn't try to correct. He doesn't try to pay homage. He's in the same universe. That universe has been projecting forward for 3 decades. He's going to continue moving forward at that speed, telling the same story, and he's not
Yeah.
going to make any amendments along the way. And it really, really, really worked well for him. He's a visionary. Yeah. That's why, like, when it was done, we're like, "What superhero property can we put him on?" I'm like, "No,
Yeah,
no,
no.
leave him in his own mind. Like, don't put him into a bounded property right now. Like,
Yeah.
give me something else." So
That is a bit of a thing, just to sort of, I guess, on a bit of a tangent. And I was thinking about this because I know, like, as soon as Fury Road was huge, and obviously all the Oscars came along, and people were like Miller should direct the next Star Wars movie, not Star Wars, the Superman movie.
Yeah.
Miller should direct Green Lantern. Miller should do this. Like, no, just piss off. Stop taking people who are doing good stuff and stick. I quite like a lot of the superhero movies.
Yeah.
But I do sort of like, and I do when I sort of see, but I will say. Ryan Coogler going from Creed to Black Panther, I'm all about that.
Yeah,
it
I'd
looks
like to
like
see
he
that
knows
too.
exactly what he's doing.
And I don't think there's any fan boundaries or any inhibiting fan expectations of Black Panther that are going to keep him within boundaries that are going to prevent him from being the filmmaker he is.
Yeah, that's it. But sometimes it's just that thing of like, if someone comes out and does like something really interesting, it's like how quick can they be put on like a huge big budget remake of a film,
right.
Or how quick can we chuck them into a superhero movie and stuff like that. And it was interesting. I saw an interview with Jeremy Saulnier, the guy who did Green Room.
Oh yeah, Jeremy Saulnier.
Yeah, and he said like after Blue Ruin he did Green Room and all that, and someone he was at a press conference or whatever, it was an interview, and someone said, "Oh, this film's quite intensely violent," and he said, "Yeah." He's like, because now that my career is sort of on the up, I'm gonna, I might end up in a situation where I'm not being able to make movies like this anymore. So I wanted to get them all made as quickly as possible. And it's like, yeah. So I guess because he's probably thinking to himself, well, any minute now they're gonna say to me, oh, can you do the here's $20 million. Can you do a big budget remake of whatever? The Hills Have Eyes or something.
Right.
And he's, we're only human, so.
How great would a Suicide Squad movie be from him? Like,
oh, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, I would take that. I'm interested. Never mind. I take back everything I just said. Let's put all these guys in that universe. But yeah,
that's true. But yeah, it is that interesting thing. Like, I'm intrigued to see what Miller does next, and even. I know, like, there's a whole thing. There was a big plan for like a trilogy of these movies, and I know like Tom Hardy signed on to do a bunch of them and all that. But at the same time, as much as I love this movie, and even as much as I love Creed, I don't necessarily need more of them. I don't really. I'm good.
Right. If Creed becomes a series, I'll watch the Creed series the same way with Rocky. I'll watch it through the good chapters and the bad. I don't think anything that they do is going to eliminate the fact that Creed is a magical moment, and the same as I don't think that
Yeah,
anything is going to like dethrone Fury Road as one of the two or three greatest large scale action movies of all time, if not the
yeah.
greatest large scale action movie of all time. So
Well,
those things are held in place.
yeah.
So I just mean that I hope, and I think that's what you mean, that I hope that those filmmakers can work within the for lack of a better term, boundaries of their own imagination rather than the boundaries of existing properties. Like
Yeah, yeah.
I just
Yeah,
I want to see that. I want to see new properties created from their imagination.
yeah, that's it. Because we are starting to get these like little, like obviously the John Wick series is going from strength to strength and stuff like that. And
Right.
and as also as well as that interesting thing, we are starting to see the sort of like Fury Road influence on movies. Like I
Mm-hmm.
think Logan had a lot of that of like washed out hopelessness in a
Sure.
sort of like Logan actually reminded me a lot of the original Mad Max in the sense of like it's that period where the world's about to end or
Mm-hmm.
it's ended but no one's worked it out yet.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. So like everything's starting to collapse. And also as well, I mean, even like you're starting to see that sort of aesthetic come in, like even like the action sequences in like Rogue One, like when you're at the end, like the spaceship fight, there was a lot more stuff that felt like obviously they can't do things in like real on the spot special effects with spaceships, but a lot of the stuff of having like spaceships crashing into each other in these like big cacophonous explosions where usually in the past that's all just been like just lasers and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like okay, well maybe is that the Mad Max influence of like having these sort of visceral smashes, and then like saw the trailer for the upcoming Star Wars. There's that little scene where you see like these like crappy junk spaceships like bouncing along the
Yeah,
desert,
that's a
kicking
great
up all the
shot.
smoke.
That's my favorite shot in the trailer.
Yeah,
It
and that's
feels
the thing.
new.
That was yeah, and that's it. That's the thing. Like, because the trailer is what it is, but that was the one shot where I was like, "Ooh, this is something that I have no frame of reference for."
Yeah.
But the more I sort of thinking about it, I was like, that feels again very Fury Roadish. You're out in the desert and it's all this sort of pieced together junk.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the thing, if like Fury Road is going to start influencing the way movies are done and more like the way action movies are done, yeah, let's see more of it. Because I mean, it wasn't. I feel like it wasn't like anything before, except I guess for Mad Max in the '70s.
Yeah, I was really. I hate to say that I was disappointed by the intake of a movie that made nearly 400 million, but everybody that I know that went to watch Mad Max in theaters went back to watch Mad Max in theaters. So I was
Yeah,
really
same.
pressing everybody, just go watch this movie because the more that it makes, the more influential it becomes from a studio perspective. It's a Warner Brothers movie, like that. At least
Yeah.
let's teach them the lesson of making films this way and do this thing, and by keeping their hands off their best visionaries. I mean it. I think was it 150 million was the budget, made almost 400 million. That's a very profitable film. But it would have been nice to see Fury Road get the Avatar numbers. And
Yeah.
then the way that we got all of those weird 3D movies after Avatar, we get the effort to emulate what happened with Fury Road in the future. And I think we're seeing
Yeah.
it just from the critical reception and the fact that it pulls in six Oscars?
Six.
Yeah. So I think that's enough to make them say, wait a minute, maybe we were onto something here. But man, I was really campaigning. I was telling everybody, just go see it. I promise you, it's like I can't think of one person I wouldn't recommend it to. Everyone who listened to me went back a second time after listening to me. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think I went 3 times to watch Fury Road, which is the most I've gone. I mean, I don't, when you write about movies, you don't have time to watch movies. You definitely don't have time to watch movies 3 times. But I went back 3 times to watch this movie.
Yeah. No. This movie because obviously Australia, we really took it
Yeah.
as our movie life. So I think there was a cinema in the city. There's a cinema called Cinema Nova, and it's my favorite cinema. It's great. It's right near where I work. It's a little arty house place, but it's cool. You can take beer into the screen and stuff like that. And actually, saying that, I think you can pretty much do that in every cinema in Australia, which is a whole other story.
Nice.
But I'm pretty sure they had Fury Road showing every day for a year. Like it was on every day. You could go and see it at 9 o'clock at night, Monday to Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever. And then it went off the cinemas for a bit. Then IMAX brought it back for like a limited thing, so you could go and watch it on IMAX in 3D. And I went to go see that. And then they took it off. And then it came back again in black and white. Went to go see that. And yeah, I mean, if the movie came back on the cinemas tomorrow, I'd probably go and see it again.
Yeah.
Like, because I've seen it. I've watched it on the cinema on IMAX, black and white. I watched it on a plane. I made my parents watch it just on the TV. I think I've watched a bit of it on my phone when it came on. There's a streaming service in Australia called Stan, and it came on that for a bit. So I sort of like, I was riding the bus home. I was like, oh, I'm just really bored. What can I watch? And I just watched, tiny little screen. I was like, no, this is still phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like, it was a bit of a slow burn for me actually, because the first time I saw it, I thought it was great. And then it wasn't until actually, I think I was flying to Spain and I was just like cycling through the entertainment system looking for a film, and I saw Fury Road and I was like, oh yeah, cool, this will do. Because I was like, oh, I just want something while I'm sort of falling asleep, so I'll just find something I've already watched. Put it on, didn't sleep a wink. I was like, oh no, I did think this film was great. This film is fucking perfect.
Yeah.
It did take that second watch for me to really lock it in my head and be like, no, this is structured like a Swiss watch. It just moves, and what is fascinating that I thought was incredible when I was watching it last night is like when you sort of have these sort of action movies, and I was sort of thinking about like Star Wars, you tend to find that you'll have like different kinds of action sequences. So you have like maybe a chase, space battle, lightsaber battle, shootout, and just in some order of those. But the fascinating thing with Fury Road is it's all the same action sequence.
Yep.
Like
it's fighting on top of a car chase. So you get them all. You just get them all at once in one take. Like it's all at once. Like there's some fist fights. There's a little bit of gunfighting. But then there's like the choreography of this. What I don't even know what do they have an official term? The people who are springing back and forth on the sticks.
The polecats.
The polecats. Yeah, the polecats. Like it's absolutely it's absolute orchestratic anarchy, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it's just the same thing the whole time, and it works. The story unfolds while that's all happening. It's great. And and the movie's attention to its own space and physics, like how often the movie keeps you up to date on where everybody is all at once. Like there's no cuts that account for anything. They don't use cuts to cover what should be action. Like the placement of the bodies and the position of the bodies even is held accountable by the film. Like it doesn't say, let's just cut here and we'll cut back and then they'll be doing this thing. It doesn't do that. Like everybody's always accounted for.
That thing, well, I mean, it is that sort of boundless imagination as well, like with Miller. Like even like in the original Mad Max, like it's more like it's a bit more low key, but having like the bikers in Mad Max are such not what they're not what you expect from bikers. Like I love the Toe Cutter, like such a good villain. Such a good villain. Obviously, they brought the actor back to be Immortan Joe, which is great. Like, he has that sort of thing where, his accent's all over the place and he speaks like a big Shakespearean actor, but he's terrifying.
Yeah.
And then, like, each one of his gang has, like, a little quirk that makes them that little bit creepy. But they're all quite effeminate and quite camp and quite wild. Like, they're not, like, these big, rough as arseholes bikers. They're just these sort of, like... They're like a theatre troupe gone bad, and that sort of just makes it that much more interesting because you can't predict it.
Right. And it's my favorite anecdote about this, and not just because I got to participate in it, but my favorite part of Fury Road, of learning about the production, is learning that George Miller gave everybody who's in the movie, every character, a backstory, even if it's not in the movie. And I thought that was so clever because he probably did that with Mad Max too, because it feels like all of those bikers carry a backstory. And the reason I say that, okay, so I'm going to tell the story. I actually got to participate in the building, the cultural understanding of the Mad Max universe a little bit. The Coma Dufour, the flame-throwing guitarist. When I finished this movie, I remember thinking to myself, that flame-throwing guitarist is going to be a visual icon. Like, we're going to talk about him as like a cult classic movie figure for the rest of time. Like, he's always going to be like the symbol of excess of Fury Road. And so I looked it up and I actually found that actor's talent agent sent her a message, or maybe it was his PR person, and sent her an email. And she emailed me back one night and said, can you do an interview at, I think it was 10:15 Melbourne time. I had no idea what time it was. I was in the bathtub and I got the email. And I'm like, and I realized 10:15 Melbourne time started 20 minutes before I received the email. So I sent it back to her really quick. I'm like, I can do this if he's still available. So she set me up on a Skype session with him, and I got to talk to him, and he actually revealed to me that his backstory was that he was found in a cave by a Morton Joe who made him his pet and trained him in the guitar and all of this stuff and put him on top of the vehicles. Like, gave me the backstory and added that he added to the backstory that the mask that he wore was taken off of his dead mother who was in the cave with him. Like,
Yeah.
So the movie gives you a flamethrowing guitarist. Awesome enough. Cool enough. The actor who played that character, Iota is his name. He's a musician. He's an Australian musician, a guitar player. He's actually playing he's playing guitar for real in the movie, and he's on top of the truck. He told me that they would do like 12-hour days, just 45 miles an hour of him on a truck playing guitar. and he made up his own backstory, which is now part of the pantheon of the universe. That Commodore Foyer, the maddened flamethrowing guitarist, is wearing his mother's face as a mask. So thought I was pretty cool to participate in that, and that I conducted that Skype interview that revealed that to the world with a towel on. That's what I was wearing. So.
And that was great. I do remember that interview, and it went a bit viral, and it was sort of like, this is the true story of Coma the Doofor and all that, and it's amazing because, like you say, you can see that, you can see each character knows who they are,
right?
And that's definitely the same. Like, you can imagine that Miller's done that in '79 as well.
Yeah.
Because there are characters who only get a handful of lines of dialogue, but they feel put together really well.
Yeah.
Like the other cops that Max deals with, who you sort of see quite briefly, they sort of have the way they carry themselves and their sort of confidence. These are people who know who they are. You know what I mean? They're not sort of like, all right, you're the police chief, you're the doomed partner.
Right.
You get the feeling there's some, like he said to them, okay, so this is how you met Max, and so on and so on. And it works really well, and it works incredibly well for Fury Road, where you've got this huge amount of like quite weird characters, but we sort of get like a bit of like face value what we see, but the characters all sort of like promise there's something else. Like, I love the fact that you have the guy who's in charge of Gastown, and he's just referred to as the People Eater.
Right.
But you never see him eat anyone.
Yeah.
But you're like, well, he must be eating people. Or maybe
Right.
doing something else. But either way, it's like, and then he's got the big bulbous feet and all that. And you're like, there's a whole story behind this dude. But we'll get to that later, you know what I mean? And
it's like every character is filming a scene, just one scene in their realized lives. It just happens to intersect with another movie. Like,
yeah,
they carry it with them and they carry it out. Like, who is the People Eater? What happened to all of the women at Furiosa's home settlement? What happened there? We don't really learn that. We don't know. Like, we just show up at that point in their movie and see what's happening in the present. Like, that could be its own movie. I would watch that movie.
Oh yeah, like, who are the buzzards? Where do the buzzards come from? You
Right.
know, what, you know. And that sequence as well, it always sort of blows me away, is when they have with the being chased by the motorcycle guys, and they're doing the jumps, and they're jumping over the truck, and they're dropping the grenades, and then there's an explosion, and then the motorcycle lands.
Right.
And apparently that's all in camera. Well, as you can see, it's all in camera. And I think it was at the anecdote I read was I think it was at Cannes actually again, but it might have been. Maybe it was the year before the film got released, and they were just debuting some footage, and they showed that sequence like of that. And Robert Rodriguez, the director, stood up in the crowd, pointed at George Miller, and was just like, "How the fuck did you do that?" You know, just completely couldn't put it together in his head, like.
And from all people, that praise coming from Robert Rodriguez, who was just kind of an expert at these things, if not as a filmmaker, then as a fan, like.
Yeah, that's it. Like, he is the original sort of guerrilla filmmaker, isn't he? He's the one who sort of like in the '90s made it what it is.
Yeah.
Like, I think he, you know, it's like Robert Rodriguez thing. I think to pay for like El Mariachi, he put himself forward for like experimental medical testing. You know, he really did the whole scraping money together thing.
Right.
But yeah, and I mean, and it is incredible. I mean, again, I think we like coming back to the same point over and over, but like, it's amazing that Miller hasn't sort of hit this point and been like, oh, fuck it, we can CGI loads of this.
Right.
It's like, no, he's still using those same techniques as like 1979, just with more money and more technology.
Right.
And I know, like, because there is a slight sort of backlash towards this movie from idiots, fucking men's rights dickheads and that kind of thing.
Right.
And there was a lot of stuff after the film came out where you'd see people having arguments with these idiots where, you know, you talk about practical effects in the film, and they're like, oh, they're not all practical effects because this was done, and then so it wasn't two practical effects have been CGI together, and you're like, yeah, that's fine, that's still a practical effect, and that's all good. Like all when you see like B-roll from Fury Road, it is all there.
Yep.
Everything has happened, and then obviously in '79 they were crashing those cars. Like if you go on the IMDb trivia, it's like, oh yeah, for some of the trucks they just like took the engines out and just let them just get smashed to shit.
Nice.
And then Road Warrior, like a lot of the crashes in that, because that was filmed. So Fury Road was filmed in like South Africa and Tunisia, and a little bit in Sydney. And Road Warrior was filmed. I think Road Warrior was filmed like right in the outback, like in the middle of nowhere. And my in-laws, my wife's mum and dad, they did a road trip up there. Some ridiculous, it's Australia, so it was like 16 hours between towns, and they did this like crazy road trip. And they stopped at the Mad Max Museum. And what it is, like a dude's just put like built a house out there, and he's gone out into the desert and he's found all the wreckage of all the old cars that they smashed in Road Warrior, and he displays them.
Oh,
and
nice.
I think like Mel Gibson's been out there and signed some stuff, and George Miller's been out there and they've donated things and all that. And it is just this museum in the middle of the desert, and it's just all this Mad Max paraphernalia that when they finished the film, Miller was like, fuck it, just left it all out there. So I mean, that's keeping that sensibility of like, no, if two cars crash into each other, I want to know that two cars have crashed into each other. I want to see it. I want to see the smash. I want to see the bits go flying. And yeah, and Miller knows that, and he does it. And like when you've got, I think it's the first chase when they sort of catch up with Furiosa when they realise she's escaping, and you've got like the war rig, the people supporting the war rig, the buzzards, and then the pursuers, and everyone's sort of after everyone else. And there's so many cool sequences where like the cars are just hitting each other and then just tumbling in like balls of metal. And you've got that dude who like sprays all the stuff and he jumps off the back with the two lancers and everything blows up. And it's, even though I've seen this film over many times, it's so satisfying.
It's hard not to see that scene and not like just raise both hands in triumph. Even when you know it's there, you've seen it 12 times. Just that guy jumping with two flame-throwing harpoons and just going for it. Like,
It's
and you're right about like the feeling of the cars hitting I don't know what it is. I'm not technical enough to understand it, but CGI movies, they could show you the visual of two things colliding, but they never seem to feel the weight and impact.
No.
It's so few movies these days get the feeling of a good example. I recently did a podcast on Speed for Pop Culture Case Study. And one of the reasons Speed works so well is because it's an actual bus and it's moving fast, and that's what's happening, and so you feel it, and it makes you remember this is what a bus weighs, this is how a bus moves, and this is what happens when a bus moves too fast. And something about using those practical effects makes that more felt, and you feel it from the very first time that Max flips his car in this movie. You're like, oh, that's an actual car crash. That is a car crash. Like that's what it looks like and feels like that feels real.
And you can't like. Yeah, I think it is. I think I'm not a huge critic of CGI. If it's done well, then yeah, great, fill your boots. But like when you see it done poorly, obviously it is what it is. But like there is that thing. Even a movie like Casino Royale, the first Daniel Craig Bond film. There's a scene at the end where he's in that like really really sexy. I think it's an Aston Martin, but it might not be. Actually, I don't think it is because I don't think they had the contract or whatever. And he swerves and the car crashes. And I think that car crash had the record for like the most flips of a car on screen or something like that. Because they just shot the car out of a cannon.
Right.
And it is one of those scenes where it's like the car spins out and it just starts flipping. And it's all actually happening and all that. And every flip, you're just like, fuck, shit, and you're reacting in real time to it. Whereas like, I was thinking back on The Matrix, like Matrix Reloaded, when the two trucks crash into each other. And it's very much CGI, and the ripples go through it. I remember the first time I watched that being blown away by it, but I watched it recently, and it was more of a curiosity. It was more like, oh yeah, cool. This is a thing.
Right.
Whereas like I do feel as though if I didn't watch Fury Road now until I'm a 50-year-old man, I'd still watch those crashes and just be like, ooh, yeah, and bits flying off, and I feel like he's created this sort of timeless thing of like, yeah, you can CGI and all that, but the technology of two cars
Yep.
hitting each other,
Yeah,
you can't advance on that.
we have that technology. We have the technology to make two cars
Yeah,
crash into each other. They're called cars. Like we have that. Like if you can make
yeah,
that work, it's felt. And I think it's there in Mad Max too, with the limitations of
yeah,
editing and how many times you can actually shoot that with $350,000. But
yeah. But
even if the crashes aren't as or expertly executed, the chase sequences kind of are. Like they feel like a car trying to get away from another car. Like the way that the
yeah,
cameras are mounted in those sequences and the motorcycles are chasing people down. Like the movement itself at least feels real.
yeah,
So,
no, very much so.
so yeah,
And Mad Max was filmed near where I live now. Actually, quite weirdly, like I went on IMDb and looked at the filming locations because I thought they were all filmed in the Outback or in
right,
Sydney or whatever. And yeah, it was like the police station. The police station is the car park of my wife's university. The bit where they're out on the beach is a place that when my parents came to visit, I took them out there. We went for a swim and all that. And it's interesting because, like, and I think this is an Australian thing, and I think it even happens now. Australia is the size of the continental US,
mm-hmm.
but so in America, the population is like what 300 million,
I think 360 maybe 370. I might be wrong.
370 million.
I think so. Yeah.
So Australia is the same size, and there's 28 million people here. So it's so much empty space, just this huge vast. And I think that is that thing that people that they use very well for like, and back in the day, like in the 70s, you saw a lot of this, and even now, like Wolf Creek and stuff like that. Australia can become this vast empty space that you can just do whatever the fuck you want, or get murdered.
Right.
And I think Mad Max does that really well because 79 there are this isn't the end of the world Mad Max. This is sort of, I think Miller did say it's supposed to be like just after the nuclear war, just before the nuclear war, because they didn't have the budget to make it an actual movie. Like
Right.
they couldn't have extras, they couldn't set it in cities and stuff like that. So they had to make it into something that was like a pre or post apocalyptic.
Yeah.
But Australia lends itself to that so well because like I learned to drive on roads like that where you just drive on the road and you can do what you like. You're practicing speed and you're practicing abrupt braking and stuff like that because you're going to drive 20 k's of road and you're not going to see anyone. 100 k's of road, sorry, you're
Right.
not going to see anyone. So like that's where you do all that kind of stuff. And I sort of lost my train of thought there. I just started talking about learning to drive. But yeah, but like that was sort of one thing I enjoyed about watching the original Mad Max is like it was very Australian, which was cool. Whereas like what was interesting about Fury Road is it was also very Australian, but there was an interesting thing that I sort of found when I spoke to people who obviously aren't Aussies or don't know Aussies. A lot of the slang and stuff like that they use is Australian slang, but because if you watched it without that frame of reference, it just looks like futuristic talk, if that makes any sense.
Right.
So when she's saying to him like, oh, schlanger and stuff like that, and it just sounds like a weird, nonsensical thing. Well, it actually means dick in Australia.
Oh.
And when it's like, oh, we need to go fast, we need to fang it. Well, that is what people say. It's like, oh, I was out the other day and he's fanging it down the road, like going really fast. And there's quite a few of them, like these little expressions that Miller's just put in as Aussie stuff, and it works really well to create this world that people are saying this nonsense, but it's not nonsense. It's Aussie nonsense.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I thought it was all like broken remnants of just all civilizations brought together to mean like to formed in a way that we don't recognize. But I didn't know that. That's really neat.
Yeah.
But it makes sense because I think he's a very proud Australian filmmaker, right? Like
Yeah.
he likes being the Australian guy. It seems.
Yeah, and there's quite a lot of Aussies in it. Like obviously Immortan Joe. I think all the baddies are Australian. Like Angus Sampson, the organic mechanic, is Bear from Fargo 2. Which I thought
Oh,
was pretty
okay. Oh, I didn't know that.
cool. And yeah, he's a big Aussie actor, and I'm trying to think of like I think two of the wives are, and all that, and yeah, and I think it's I did appreciate I love the fact that they brought back the same actor to play Immortan Joe,
That's
who
Toe
played the
Cutter.
Toe Cutter.
Yeah, that made me wonder. Like, I wonder what Immortan Joe's backstory was. If it was just like an extension of Toe Cutter, like they scraped him off the road and
Yeah,
brought him back to life, and that's why he's so messed up with his body. But I was curious. Like,
yeah.
they all got backstory. So I wonder what Immortan Joe's was if it tied into. But it wasn't her. It's just it probably not. I mean, that's a big stretch to build Toe Cutter being hit by a semi to being the king of
Yeah.
Waterworld, but it was neat. It was neat that they brought him back. I think, as far as I could tell, I was looking to see like who from the first came back for the fourth, and as far as I could tell, that actor, I forget his name. I had it written down.
Hugh Burns Key, I think.
Yeah, that's him. Yeah, as far as I could tell, he was like the second most important return. Like George Miller was the first, and then like this,
Yeah.
like he was the second most important. He played the villain, pretty much the main villain in both, co-main
Yeah.
villain in the first. But I thought that was
But
really
it's
neat.
yeah, and it's good. You've got like for your antagonist, you've got the same actor playing two different characters, and then for your protagonist, you've got two actors playing the same character
Right.
and all that. And it's, I mean, I think, well, yeah, we're probably running out of time a bit, but it's, I think really, in terms of, like I'm just looking at my notes to see if there's anything. Yeah, like you say with the shooting, with the editing and stuff like that. When you've got occasionally, it will cut to those like aerial shots. Like it's, I feel like it's like drone photography or whatever, and you can just get a little glimpse of the desert, and you can sort of see where the war rig is and where other things are, and you've got the flares popping up and all that. And it's a cool effect, but it also just like acclimatizes your brain, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, okay, I can see where everyone is now. And then the camera sort of pulls in as everyone sort of hits. Like, okay, that's brilliant.
Yeah, that's a perfect comparison point to what we're saying about how much was traveled from movie one to movie four. Because Fury Road has that shot. I don't think Mad Max could have had that shot, or that maybe it necessarily would have needed it because it was a line of bikers for them. But with Fury Road, it's a whole army of a culture coming together, and so pulling back and giving that aerial view of how big the world is, how many people are involved in this chase, and the mechanics of that chase. So you have the war rig in front, and then all these other specialized vehicles behind it. And I know the music plays over that shot, and I love that. It sounds more distant, like they fade the music in that shot, and it pulls back, and you see them traveling into the outback, and you see like the two flares shooting up in the air, and it's just like, wow, something. This movie is just, it's just a parade of chaos, and I love that shot gets you ready for that. It scopes the chaos for you. It's like, look how much we're doing right now. It's almost bragging. It's like, look how much we already have going in Act 1.
Yeah, and like you say, it's that interesting thing of like being orchestrated chaos, because they do little things just to put you in the right. So when you have that bit when they're looking through the binoculars and they can see the people eater, and it is like, oh, they've got a rig, they've got flamers, they've got polecats. Okay, so we know what that is.
Yeah.
But they never do that for the bullet farm. You just sort of work it out for yourself.
Yeah.
And it is this sort of thing of like, oh god, yeah, it's one of those films that you think to yourself, this is fantastic, but I can totally see how someone could have ballsed it up, and it could have just been. I don't know if you've seen any of Michael Bay's Transformer movies.
The first two. I've seen the first two.
I saw the first one, and that was very much a sense of like, I can't see it. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Whereas interestingly enough, even though this one is just like, dude, things are just constantly happening. I think we said this earlier. You always know where everyone is, and also where each car is, and which cars are important. Like, okay, well, I know where this, because there was a sequence actually that I sort of, when I was watching it last night, I hadn't really sort of spotted this little move before. I think I just had been just into it and hadn't been paying attention. But I think it's like when Max nearly falls off the truck and they chuck him onto the other car, and then he's on the other big rig that's on fire.
Yeah.
And there's just this weird little sort of NASCAR move where he sort of pulls ahead, Furiosa goes behind him, and then he drops back to block her. And I just hadn't spotted that before, and I was just watching, I was like, that is just such a cool sequence. I was so happy with it. And then he jumps out of the rig I think he gets pole-catted out of the rig and all that. And then which is one of the best sequences of the film, where he's on the polecat pole and he goes to the ground, and then as he comes up, and you just have that ace shot where it's just him in the center just moving like a metronome, and everything's just exploding in the background.
Yeah, it's
amazing.
It's like one shot just swings across. He just swings across all the explosions.
Yeah.
It's like the Cirque du Soleil of movies, because if one element slips out, then the whole thing crumbles, but one element never slips out. Like,
Yeah.
there's not a misstep in the movie.
No, and that's it. And I mean, there is that interesting thing of like, I went through a bit of a phase of this of like trying to sort of decide what was a perfect movie. Like what even movies that like I really enjoyed. Even movies like that I really enjoyed. There's always some one little bit or something that might just take you a little bit out of the movie or just like. But yeah, Fury Road, I'm pretty much into it. Like there's no elements I sort of think to myself, oh that's unfortunate or that doesn't work. Like I always it's this film sort of puts me in mind of like it's like Raiders or Star Wars. You know, it's just one of those movies that if it's on TV, I'll watch it. You know, if it's on a plane, I'll watch it. And also as well, like I sort of had a bit of a thought in my head last night in terms of like trying to compare this to another movie, and I did find myself comparing it to Star Wars in the sense of like unconventionally scripted. Like if you actually break down Star Wars, it doesn't make huge amounts of sense because there's a lot of like it's supposed to be a standalone film when it was first made, but there's so much stuff in it that is like, you know, why does Luke get a lightsaber? He doesn't use it. You know,
Right.
why does the baddie never interact? You know, in terms of like the rules that you sort of put on a film, you're like, okay, well, if Luke Skywalker gets a lightsaber in Act 1, he's going to be fighting the baddie at the end, but he isn't. You know, and then all that, and it's all very odd. But the thing as well with Star Wars that's quite similar to this is the whole film is constant little action sequences. Like it is this constant sort of there's very little breathing room. It is like lots of and this takes that to its extreme. Like that like Fury Road drops a lot of the breathing room out entirely and just sort of says because even when people are having conversations, they're in the truck that's moving, that's being pursued. Now, even if they haven't caught up and they're having the thing, you do have like, you know, you can, if you look outside the truck, you can see shadows in the distance and you can probably very faintly hear the electric guitar. So the action sequence hasn't so much stopped as just sort of paused.
Right.
You know, it's still happening. It's not like it hasn't had a definitive end and we've moved to something else.
Yeah, even when the truck stops, they're still reeling along. Like when they're in the tunnel asking for passage, I think the truck still idles through. She's walking alongside of it. Like even if they have to slow down, and it doesn't stop action, it just slows the movement. Like you got about a 3-minute conversation between her and the guards at that passage, and before they take off, and it becomes high octane, as you mentioned, motorcycle jumpers again. So yeah, it shouldn't work. It does work, and nothing in it makes sense. To the credit of Warner Brothers, if this was pitched to me exactly as it came out, I would have had a million reservations. But they let him go, and it works. It's really great stuff.
Oh, the thing I was saying, like for this sort of like economic storytelling and stuff like that, is it has this interesting thing where when something happens, someone works it out very quickly. So there's no sort of waiting around. So literally, when they look out the window and they see that the war rig's gone off course, Joe instantly realizes what it is. Like straight away, he just turns and runs out the room. And then later on, when it's like, again, they see the war rig in the distance and it's changed direction. And a few people are like, what are they doing? And Joe goes, they're going back, you know, and he instantly works it out. There's no sort of like, dum-de-dum. And then right at the end, like you've had the setup in the first 5 minutes where you see the tattoo that says Universal Donor on Mad Max's back. And then at the end, where as soon as the character says she's lost too much blood, there isn't like a moment of like, oh no, you know, and then Max kind of light bulbs and goes, oh my god, I've got an idea. It's like instantaneously he's pulling tubes out of his suit, you know what I mean, and getting the blood moving.
Yeah.
Like, I do really appreciate that in the sense of like, I mean, it's a 2-hour movie, but it's just economic. There's not a wasted breath, not a wasted second. There's no pointless waiting around. It's like, no, just forward momentum all the time. Just keep going. And it's genius.
Yeah. And I think we haven't even I feel like we're barely scratching the surface. I know we're pushing your time limit, but I don't want to let this go without saying that Charlize Theron is Oscar worthy in this movie.
Oh, of course,
it should have been thrown in.
Yeah.
Like she's so good that it's hard to even talk about her. Like that's the whole movie really, but the character and the acting job, she's incredible in this.
Yeah.
Like just we talked about earlier why they made Furiosa the hero of the movie, but you don't ask that when you're watching because she sells it so well. Like her strength, her intelligence, her determination, her grit is every bit as evident as it was when we met Mad Max in 1979. Like we see it as soon as we see her, we know when she's just sitting there waiting to take off. So
Yeah.
and she sells it from every point there forward. And just again, another perfect element held in place by a million perfect elements that would only work if they held each other up.
No, and that's perfect. Yeah, she is. It's hard to quantify. Like she is. Like we're having this pretty cool renaissance of these like awesome female action heroes, but
Yeah.
she's incredible for a variety of reasons. Like you say, it's hard to sort of pinpoint. Like, I can't even think of like a favorite moment of her because she's just. I think the bit when I will say actually a bit that I absolutely love that sort of like I think is a great hero moment is when she's been stabbed. And I think she's chucked Max onto the other car and all that and everything, and Nux is there with her, and they're closing in on Joe's truck, and she's like, "I'm gonna need you to drive,"
Yeah.
you know, and then she's like, and she's all fucked up, but she's climbing out of the truck to go and rescue the other wife, and you're like, "Oh yeah, that is pure bona fide fucking hero moment." That's
Right.
like. Come on, you know, and then obviously, and I mean, I think it is that thing. Like Max is very much a sidekick in this film. He is just,
Yeah.
you know, he's a blunt instrument that she can point at people, and they make sure to acknowledge that by having her kill Joe. You know,
Right.
it makes total sense, like thematically for her, yeah, for her to be the one that shoves the hook in his face and all that, and it's perfect. I mean, it's genius, and she is like, I think the thing with that character is I'm quite happy with that self-contained. Like I know there was a lot of talk of a spin-off. Like no, that is perfect. She is in that box and that's fine. Like she gets a little bit of backstory, but you don't find out stupid stuff. You don't need to know how she lost her arm. You don't need to know shit like that.
Yeah.
You just get an idea of why she is the way she is and why she would want to rescue these women. And yeah, it's perfect.
One thing I love about it, and you mentioned earlier, there was a lot of backlash from MRA types who eventually took offense to the idea of her. But the movie itself, when I was watching it, a trap that a lot of male filmmakers with good intentions fall into, I think, a lot of times is because it's both a trendy and necessary thing, is that they build these characters who are women heroes. It's the strong female lead. Good, we need that. But I think what we need more of that is just heroes that are female. Like,
yeah,
and you don't think when you're watching, like, oh, cool, this movie has a strong female hero. You think, no, she's the hero. She's the hero. She's operating as the hero. The movie doesn't point bells and whistles at it. It's organic, it makes sense, and I only even began to think of her as like the strong female hero really when I realized there were going to be people who were upset about the fact that they quote unquote forced a female hero. It's nothing forced about it. She's the hero.
No.
And that's hard for a male filmmaker to do. Particularly I don't want to extend too much, but you talked earlier about how anybody who does anything creative gets thrown into these major properties. But that doesn't happen with female filmmakers. It doesn't happen with women filmmakers. Yeah. So we don't get the organically unquestioned female hero who comes without the self-trumpeted bells and whistles of the female hero very often. And we need it. We need there to be more Furiosas so that it doesn't seem like an event when we have a Furiosa. So that it's not up for contention or it's not a political move. It's just the fact that fucking Charlize Theron is the best talented in the movie in terms of acting skill, and her character is the hero. Like, it's not meant to be it operates as a very feminist movie. That's good. That's fine. But it's not something that the movie itself... I think I'm saying this wrong. I'm coming across poorly. But because she just is the hero, that she's not the shoehorned or trumpeted or highlighted female hero, that's what the world needs. It needs women heroes that girls can look at and say, oh, look, that just happens to be a female hero here. That can happen. And it's not an event. And it's not insincere. She's just the fucking hero.
Yeah.
And
there's not like a sequence where someone's like, "What? A female?" You know, not like a woman.
Right.
And, it's everyone treat the scene where she kicks fuck out of Mad Max with one arm, and it's not like he's like pulling his punches. It's he's like, "Oh, this woman's gonna fucking kill me,"
right?
Because she's stronger than I am, and I need to get away from this. Like, and it's not a sort of thing of like, "Oh, I can't hate you because you're a woman." It's like, no, I've got to protect myself because this one-armed character's gonna fuck me up,
right?
And yeah, it's an incredible feat. It's I mean, it shouldn't be, as we've said, like it shouldn't be this way. But like I'm always like amazed. Like there is a sequence in this film when they first arrive, where they think they're at the Green Place. And all the women come down, and I think it's like in this sort of scene, in this sort of movie, this sort of action movie, you never see. I think it's like 13 women and Nux and Max.
Right.
Nux and Max do not speak, and and these women are just like interacting with each other, which is not something that you see in like these huge blockbuster movies, which is a shame because these characters are amazing.
Yeah.
The old woman with the bag of seeds is like the best character. When they sort of pull up and all the dudes have like shown up to get them, and she's like out the window with a shotgun, and she's like, "Here we go, girls!" You're like, "Oh, this is fucking killer." And like with the women on the back, where they've got and it's like one man, one bullet. I absolutely love that line.
Yeah.
Like I just like because I love it because I think it's a great line, and I love it because I think it works really well. But I also love it because I love the fact that at least one men's rights activist has seen this film, and that line has made them feel physically ill.
Yeah.
And that is enough for me.
Yeah.
If only one of them.
Just as a side product from it being a good movie, and it's not malicious. It's just this is how movies should be. It should just be this natural that the hero could be man, woman, interchangeably. It should be.
Yeah.
So yes, it should drive them crazy. And if we get rid of them, maybe we can get more Furiosas. I would love to see a million more naturally heroic Furiosas in the future. And all of the wives too, which is amazing that you can get 5 servant characters, each identifiable on their own, and you can talk about them by name, personality, language, mannerisms. Like every character is, every woman character has the same heft and weight as the men characters in this movie.
Yeah, very much so. And the wives are an incredible feat because they're just like, it works perfectly well because they are, obviously because of the prize breeders, they're all shockingly beautiful women. But you could say you've got one of them's crazy, one of them's something else, one of them's this, one of them's that. And they each have like very distinct characteristics and very distinct characters and all do like cool hero shit throughout the film. Like they're not just sort of damsels in distress. It's one of those things of like, it's an incredible feat, but it shouldn't be in 2015.
Right.
2015, this should just be par for the course. And I think we are starting to get like a cool sort of movement of like, obviously like, what's it called? Mission Impossible, the newest Mission Impossible. Like Rebecca Ferguson's character was very much in this, I feel like in this vein of like, someone who will kick ass and take names and just was a very cool character. I'm like, Star Wars is trying its best to sort of like push through a lot of this sort of stuff. It's incredible that this has become a thing that, I'm finding myself arguing with people on the internet about, where it's like, oh, you can't have in Rogue One, like the argument was like, a female character would never be able to lead a bunch of men. You're like, dude, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, because the movies, it should be a world where this happens and we don't even debate the politics of the gender element to it, because the movies are not debating that. They just happen to have female heroes, and they work. The debate comes anti-textually outside of the text.
That's it. Like no one's in Star Wars saying, Rey, you're a girl, you can't be a Jedi. No one's saying that. Yeah. It's just dickheads who are saying it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess Furiosa will hopefully move us in the right direction.
This movie's loud enough that it's bigger than them, and they're just flies bouncing off of a beast here. So
that's it, which is good. Okay, anything else you would like to add about these two wonderful, wonderful movies?
Just tangentially off of everything else. If any of your listeners love Fury Road but haven't really watched the earlier Mad Max films in a while, or maybe never at all. I think there's a lot more of that than we know. You should do it. You should go back and trace the building of the orchestra that is Fury Road. It's highly worth your time. Start with Mad Max, work through them all, and do what you can to get through Beyond Thunderdome, and it's worth it. The first 2 Mad Max movies are definitely movies that should be in your in the canon of your movie knowledge.
Oh, definitely. I mean, Road Warrior is fantastic. Like, I think the great thing about, to be honest, I've only seen half of Thunderdome, and I just couldn't bother. But if you watch it as a trilogy of like Mad Max, Road Warrior, and Fury Road, it's incredible the fact that these are 3 quite similar movies that are also very, very different. Like the setting doesn't really lend itself to many plot lines, but Miller finds them all.
Right.
So they are very different movies. Like Road Warrior is sort of like more of a siege movie, and Mad Max is more of a cop movie, and then obviously this is a chase movie, and they're like you say, I can't fault them. They're genius. I think Miller just has that sort of anarchy, alchemy. I can't think of what I'm trying to think. He just has that down of like ridiculous characters who feel really fleshed out no matter how weird they are. Like in Road Warrior, I love the humongous, like the baddie, where he's just like the big massive dude with the hockey mask.
Yeah.
Like, just walk away. He's just very calm, very cool and all that. And yeah, I think he just has an eye for the whole thing, and just he knows how to crash the fuck out of a car.
Yes, he does.
Which is really cool.
Yeah, that alone makes the first two worth watching. So highly recommend it.
Cool. Okay, well, Dave, where can people find you on the internet?
I am on the internet. Of course, we have the website that you're such a huge contributor to, audienceseverywhere.net. It's our little love child that we've all produced together. You can find that site's handle on Twitter at We Talk Movies, one word. And I'm on Twitter personally. I can never remember my own handle, but I believe it's AE_David S. I think is my Twitter.
That sounds right.
Yeah. If not, I retweet myself from the site's account all the time, so you can find me on there. So that's where I'm at. Find me. Let's talk about Fury Road. I'll do it all day long.
Cool. Okay, well, obviously, if you want to guest on this show, you can find me on Twitter at firsttolastpod, or email me directly at fromfirsttolastpodcast@gmail.com. There are lots of shows to go, and every 10 episodes we do a wonderful movie special. I really enjoy these movie specials because it's sort of interesting now that we're in that period where people, sequels are coming around to movies that are quite old, I guess, so you have like, for example, when we did Rocky, like it was interesting to have like a movie made in the early 70s and then a movie made in 2015 and all that. And it's fascinating just to see like how filmmaking language changes, how it evolves, how it's sort of, I think definitely watching it, the difference between watching movies made in the 70s and watching movies made now is just like how bleak the 70s seems. You're like, Nixon, take it down, mate. It's but it's good.
Yeah, things were that bad in the 70s that we got those nasty movies. Maybe we'll survive Trump. I mean, it's a point of hope, right?
Yeah, that's it. Like, we'll be doing, like, when my children inherit this podcast, they'll be doing things like this. And, like, they'll have to explain who Trump is.
There are the nasty movies that will undoubtedly be made in 2020. We're going to get some nasty stuff made in that year, I'm sure.
They'll be like, oh, yeah, that guy who was president for 200 days and then whatever.
Like Mad Max 1 was crazy, but did you guys see Mad Max 6 in 2021? Good Lord. That was just a snuff film.
Oh, dear. Okay, well, Dave, thank you for coming on, mate. This is really nice, and it was a good...
Thanks for having me. I always like being on.
Well, it's good. It's a good excuse to watch Mad Max, which is always good.
Yeah.
Even if you don't really need an excuse, but it's all good. Well, my name is Sean Fallon. This has been From First to Last. Goodbye.